like it was a very wide spectrum of topics that you were covering
Mm.
within in those documentaries, and each one is just like pretty like they're not common topics. They're not something that you just like naturally think of. For example, with Eternal Father, like this is not something that, for example, I've just discussed with my siblings or my parents. I'm like, yeah, would you ever consider just freezing yourself for the next 20, 25 years? And, it's like, what would life be after when you come back? Um, and also, for example, the Into the Blue, like that one was informative for me because like I didn't know there was that kind of program that they do for children over in it was in Denmark, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, watching it and seeing that the experience that they go through, I was like, wow, it might be a bit traumatic for them, but I mean, they're doing it in a safe environment, and I think it does teach them empathy, which a lot of people, like a lot of people who grow up in Europe, kind of miss out because I'm not saying they miss out on empathy. I mean, they miss out on having those specific traumatic experiences. They miss out on them compared to, for example, us in the Arab world, where we face this on a constant basis. But going on this point, I want to understand what's your thought process when you're making these documentaries? Like how are you coming to these ideas? Where are these topics coming from? Um, what's your inspiration on behind these?
Yeah, I mean, I guess documentary filmmaking for me is just an excuse to follow my curiosity, and
Hmm.
I like to approach things in a very open-minded way. So it usually begins with a question of, what is it like to grow up next to a nuclear power plant, or um,
Yeah.
what is it like? Why would a young girl want to take part in a police boot camp, or how would it? What is it like to have a parent that has chosen to be frozen? And then I go about like trying to immerse myself in a specific world or getting access to the right place, and then finding the right person is really important to me because I'm interested
Mhm.
in understanding something from mostly one person's perspective, and really um, using film to kind of tell their own experience from a subjective point of view. Um, and I think those are the films that I also appreciate the most, where suddenly I'm transported into someone's life that I would never have been able to meet, or maybe never have been able to understand unless I had seen something from their point of view. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I guess that's the um, what leads me, and that's also the reason why it's so different from film to film. Um, I try to. I mean, I think generally I enjoy exploring things from young people's point of view because they have a kind of unfiltered view on reality. And from my experience, when I talk to adults, um, or when I'm filming adults, they're often much more self-conscious, and they are kind of fishing and trying to say the right thing, or
Yeah.
wanting to. There's a self-consciousness, and I think children um, have just this. I don't even want to call it naivety, but I think they're not afraid of saying something silly, or and especially before adolescence, there's this kind of purity and
Mhm.
sense of wonder about the world where you're experiencing everything for the first time, and I think that's so exciting for me that I gravitate towards those kind of people who are going through a transformative experience for the first time.
I think we saw that very clearly in Into the Plant, or I think that was yeah. Um, like the main character, was it Sam, if I'm
Yeah,
not
Sam and the
mistaken?
Plant Next Door.
Sam and the Plant Next Door. Memory.
It's a
Um,
long title.
Sam's character really like amazed me because like when I was watching him the way he was speaking as well. First of all, I was wondering where did you find this kid to perform in this documentary. And is he naturally like that? Is he Is that actually something he's passionate about in real life? Because the way he was acting in the documentary, um, it seemed like this was just his natural element. This is actually what he wants. And at the same time, for someone of that age, I'm not sure if his age was mentioned in the documentary, but he seemed like what he was, maybe 8 or 9
He's
or
11.
something like that. He's 11,
Yeah,
and
10 or 11.
even at that age, like the topics he was thinking about and what he was passionate about was showed an element of awareness that most adults don't even have.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I mean, with
maybe,
that,
yeah, I
sorry,
was just curious. How do you find this person?
that film began with I was aware of Hinkley Point, which is the nuclear power station that's being built in the UK, and I think
Hmm.
the theme of time interests me, and that we're creating nuclear waste that's going to outlive humanity, and the question of what are we doing for the next generations to come. So I knew that I wanted to explore the nuclear power through the eyes of a child who was living nearby. Or I think at the beginning, I thought maybe there'll be three different children with different perspectives. So I just went to all of the schools surrounding the power plant and spent time with them. And I was just sitting in one of the classes, and I heard Sam tell a story, and I could just see there was this light in his eyes, and the vocabulary that he used was
Hmm.
so advanced and so precocious, and like all of his classmates were just kind of like cross-eyed, and like he was a level beyond all of them, and so I just knew it has to be him. And I think going into it, um, I somehow expected most of the people in the surrounding area to be opposed to the power station, but
Yeah,
what I discovered was that it's actually a big employer, and most of the people living there, are employed by the plant in various ways, whether it's security guards or cleaners. So
yeah,
Sam was actually one of the few children that saw it in a critical light, and I think you know um, he's an only child, and his parents speak to him like he's an adult. They have a very mature relationship, and um, an interesting detail is that his mother um, became deaf when she was 16, and when he was born, she communicated to him in sign language, so he could actually speak sign language before he could speak
Wow.
verbally. And so
oh
I think
wow,
there's some research about this that like if children learn sign language, that part of the brain develops, and so that when you express yourself with words, he was saying things like, "I need something to quench my thirst," instead of "I'm thirsty."
Yeah.
So it's completely him. I didn't put any words in his mouth. I just try to create situations in which specific things come to light. I might say, um, let's go for a walk around the plant with your friend, or let's go,
Mm.
um, and do this specific thing. And some things are just things that randomly happen, like the marine biologist visiting. That was something that I had no control over, and I think Sam the marine biologist had no idea of the questions that Sam would come. He thought he could just fool the children and fob them off. Um, but I was amazed as well at the way that Sam's imagination worked, and how mature he was somehow for a person that age. So that was just completely one of the gifts that life gives you, really, and the fact that his parents welcomed me and trusted me, and I think um, it's always it's important for me that the people I'm filming also get something out of it, or that they're going along for the ride. I don't feel comfortable kind of forcing myself way into their life, or it's also important that they recognize themselves in the final film as being authentic. So in that sense, yeah, Sam was pleased with how he came across. and now he's 18, 19, and he's like transformed, and probably it's very strange for him to look back at that film now, but
Yeah, definitely.
mm.
Um,
Can I
Ali,
ask
you have a comment?
what lessons did you learn from your first documentary that helped you on future projects?
Well, I mean, that's always the thing that the first credit on people's IMDb is rarely their first film. They usually have a
Mm.
few under the rug that are never going to see the light of day. So I definitely made things before that um, I made a film when I first came to Denmark about an Afghan journalist who was seeking asylum in Denmark.
Mhm.
And that was really the first time I had a camera in my hands and I was trying to figure out how to make a documentary. And I think it was challenging for many reasons. I think I had an idea that you just had to film everything, and I was constantly afraid of missing something or that someone would say something and I wouldn't capture it. So, and the fact that I was spending weeks at a time with them in this asylum center, and it, I think the nature of the system is just there's a lot of waiting time, so there
Mhm.
wasn't much happening, um, and so I guess yeah, you could argue that that's like true to the situation, but it would also be quite challenging just to watch a film where people are sitting around and nothing is going happening. So every time I would come back, I would be frustrated, like why didn't I capture this? Or and I think the other challenge was that um, the main, the protagonist was a journalist, so she was also very um, used to controlling a narrative.
Mhm.
So there was a story that she wanted to tell, um, which is completely understandable, and I think it was a very vulnerable situation for them where they were seeking asylum and they almost, even though I was very transparent about the fact that the film is not going to help your case, um,
Mm.
just to make sure that we're aligned. Like I can't promise that this film is going to um, help give you asylum. I'm just trying to document your experience of what it's like to meet the Danish system. But I think still there was some element of hope that it might. So constantly she was um, trying to kind of give me her version of um, I don't know, reality or her story. And I think, yeah, this is a long answer to your question, but I think that it's rarely the people who um, want to be heard or the people who respond quickest to a casting call that um, are the best documentary characters. I think
Mm.
is usually the people who um, kind of I would say the most ordinary people, maybe in extraordinary situations, that fascinate me at least. And I think that Zainab's story would have made
Mhm.
a great article, but it probably wasn't suited to a film because there was um, So I think what I learned was that it's actually personally it my style of filmmaking. I've kind of come to terms with the fact that it's okay to create situations that are true to these people's lives. That I like to spend a lot of time with people off camera to learn about the rituals and how they are, and then I register. Oh, this they're saying this or this is important to them, or they do this on a daily basis, and then I will try and create a situation where I can bring something to light or um, I can kind of show their experience in a scene where something is happening. And to be honest, people talk about fly on the wall filmmaking or observational documentary. I think that just having the camera in a space with someone is there's always an element of performance, and I think
Right.
good documentary characters are probably good at performing a version of themselves that's closest to who they are in normal life. And I think it's about finding those people who are able to like make that mental kind of play of being like, okay, I know there's a camera here, but I'm going to try and I think it requires some element of abstraction. And I've struggled before sometimes where people who aren't able to abstract from that or are constantly aware of the camera. And I think, again, adults are often more, they find it harder to be themselves in front of a camera than children do. Don't know if that's an answer to your question.
So right now, are you recording for a 30-minute short documentary? How much footage do you have that goes into that 30-minute
I think it's really different. Like for Into the Blue and Eternal Father, I don't know how much I should kind of shortly summarize what both of them are about. So Into the Blue follows a Tatia, who's a 14-year-old girl, over the course of a week in this boot camp for teenage girls from a social housing area in Copenhagen. So there's a very clear kind of course of time, a week, and there's a clear kind of beginning, middle, and end. And in that, we were really just passengers in this ship, and the police didn't tell us anything about what was going to happen. So it was really a matter of like us reacting to things that were unfolding and trying to capture them in the best way that we could. With Eternal Father, which is about a father who has decided to cryonically preserve himself, and how his family respond to that decision. He's already made that decision when I, by the time that I meet him. So there's not a natural drama. I mean, really, it's more of a existential meditation about what that means for the family members. So there's nothing kind of naturally happening to go and film. So in the first case, there was a lot of material like with Into the Blue because we didn't know what was important or what was going to happen. So there's this constant feeling of like, we just need to film. And I think there was, 15 girls. We could kind of blend into the background and just, they were going to do that stuff anyway. So we may as well just film it. And I think as the week got along, we could realize maybe this thing's not going to be important, or like we need some more quiet moments and we don't need as many dramatic moments or whatever. But with Eternal Father, it was more of quite intentionally. I spent a lot of time with them just hanging out, and then I figured out, okay, NASA has his relationship to his mother that he lost a few years ago is important to him. How can I portray that? And I was more kind of setting up these situations where I'd say to him and his wife in the kitchen, could you talk about your mother's grave? And then I just let it go from there, kind of. And the way that it unfolds, I have no control over. But I'm more intentionally like setting things underway. And so, in the first case, we probably had, what's my guess? I don't know, 80 hours of footage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Just because like there were long days and there's just constantly things going on, and so it was a nightmare to think and log and with Eternal Father we probably had 20, so it was much more manageable. And then I think you can also just when you're in the editing room that's probably not that important, or because Into the Blue
You
there's
kind of
also
have a structure in your head to like what you want the whole story to look like, so you can prioritize which scenes are benefiting the total story arc, I'm assuming.
yeah, exactly. And it's usually dialogue between mostly two people or as a family in quite a controlled situation, whereas Into the Blue there's 14 different wireless microphones and you don't know, like, should I be listening to this channel or this channel, or is what they're saying important? I think luckily I had chosen, I want to focus on Tatia, so that was already like a clear choice that I knew I wanted to experience this police camp from the eyes of someone who was a kind of observer, and because it was so hectic and there's these kind of teenage dynamics. I think I was really interested in her experience of that, and also the social dynamics of play. Of there's these people that very clearly are part of the group or the ringleaders, and it's also about her trying to find her place socially and also come out of her shell. So I kind of I just knew I just have to follow her throughout the whole thing, and that helped me eliminate like I didn't have to create that in post. Like, but after day three, I was getting worried because I was like, she's just very quiet in every situation, and it's kind of on the outside. I don't know if anything's going to happen, and the risk. I mean, would be that that's okay for like the beginning of the film, but you kind of, I think it's a strange conflict that you have as a filmmaker because you obviously wish the people that you're filming the best, but you also kind of you need something to happen.
Yeah. Because if
So
you're just filming for 80 hours straight and nothing is happening, you're stuck with 80 hours of footage of no content.
exactly, then maybe you should be working in like performance art or like in some kind of museum space where you can play an 80-hour film.
Right. You kind of want those dramatic moments, and then when they happen, what's that like for you? Capturing like a moment where someone's crying or someone's having a really deep emotional moment, filming that. Um, do you ever get people trying to get you to turn off the camera, or are they fully embracing the documentary? Or what's that
I,
like for you? Yeah.
it's a good question. I always feel very conflicted. Um, and I think that's why it's important for me from the outset to make sure that we have, there's a mutual trust between us, and there's the person that I'm filming also is invested somehow, that I'm not doing it against their will. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in most cases, when that happens, we have a relationship
Mm-hmm.
beforehand. So it's not like I'm filming a stranger. But I think there's a human response when you are witness to something unpleasant for someone. You want to intervene. Um, I think I make it very clear that um, I would like to film everything that happens, and then we can always discuss later on if there's something that you don't want to be part of the film, and we can discuss that.
Mhm.
So I think in that sense, that's often a relief for people that they don't feel like this is going to be used against my will, or um, the fact that it's being filmed doesn't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
mean that anyone's going to see it. Um, and I just to what I try to remind myself is that often the things that I'm most nervous about, or the things that I think will be the most tricky when showing the final film to people, is often not the case. Like with in the situation where Tatia is plunged into the water, first of all, that was a mistake. That she was just supposed to be dipped, and
Yeah.
and that something happens. Um, I really felt uncomfortable in that situation, and I felt like that a line had been crossed somehow, and
Mm-hmm.
that there was like constantly this. They were the police were pushing the boundaries, and then it went too far in that situation. And so in my head, I came back and I was like, we can't use that in the film. Just to go back to that situation where she is plunged in the water,
Right.
Mm.
my gut reaction was this is really unpleasant,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm.
also felt somehow complicit in the police's behavior, and you know the whole we didn't know what their plan was, and so I felt like I had a trust had also been breached between me and Tatia, because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to intervene and be like, we didn't know this was going to happen. I hope you know that we have no role in this. But at the same time, we also have a relationship with the police, that we can't intervene and we want to maintain the bond with them. So anyway, I got back home and I just thought, we're not going to use that. And I think after some time, we showed the cut to people, and then I showed it to some people, and other people had a different response to it. I think in the context of everything that happens, because I think the reality was that after that, on the same day, we got back to this cabin, and I could just see that, like, Tatia suddenly had come out of her shell, and she was like filming rap videos on TikTok and like laughing in this really raucous way. And I think she had kind of got the recognition of her peers and overcome some kind of hurdle. And as you said at the beginning, say that like it's this fine balance between pushing people's boundaries and also exposing them to something that could be potentially traumatic. But I think when I thought about it, I was like, even though I don't necessarily agree with how they handled that situation, it did trigger a generally positive response that like she overcame this boundary and like found her voice somehow in the group. So when I showed her the final film, I was really nervous about like what she was going to say to that. And afterwards, she said to me, "You have to promise to remove one thing from the film." I was like, "Okay, what is it?" She's like, "There's this photo of socks drying on the radiator." It's like, it's so gross.
Of all of the scenes that occurred in that documentary, that's the thing that she focused on.
Yeah, exactly. And I was
That's,
like, we can figure that out.
it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
It's curious. Like something that made me curious was you mentioned about how you build a rapport and relationship with all these people, and that definitely makes them comfortable to open up to the individual. But I guess something that I still didn't understand was how does this make them feel comfortable around the camera, around the idea that what they're portraying, which is themselves, is going to be presented to other people. And like for example, if I feel comfortable to show my true self to Ali, doesn't mean I'm willing to show that to everyone else. Maybe if I'm around Ali, he makes me feel comfortable to show it around people that if I'm in a group setting. But to be filmed and documented and then possibly presented my true self to people who I don't necessarily want them to know, how do people accept that? Like, how do they accept to be a part of that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that's the kind of the question that everyone reckons with when beginning a documentary. And it's very hard to speak to people about what it's going to entail before the film actually is out there, because you don't know, is this going to be something that's seen by 5 people, or is it going to be something that ends up winning an Oscar and is seen by millions of people. So, and I think in some sense I'm also looking for people who are not chasing it to being seen by millions of people. I think there's some, if you make a portrait of Bill Gates or some like leading figure, their like whole media team probably wants to know, like, is this worth our time? Is it gonna reach a wider audience? So I think that it's really delicate in that sense of finding someone who is not in it to achieve some kind of fame, but who's also comfortable with like laying themselves bare. And I think you can never fully understand what the implications mean for to be seen publicly. And so I try to kind of have that discussion and say, there's this whole experience now, and then there's when the film meets the world, and I can't promise one way or another, but I think that um, because I'm not asking people to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do, I think it's just important to um, for them to understand why is it that you want to document this, or why is it important to you? And I think often it's a kind of just like any other human relationship that it's based on trust, and
Yeah.
I think it's often something in my own life that makes me interested in them. Or I just try to really say, I think what you're going through is really interesting, and I want to try and find out. Like, so that's the kind of thing that was drive the process. Is just them trusting that my what's the word, that my intentions are good, and that like
Yeah.
I will do the best to portray them like in as I see them, really. So I think it is kind of more and more of a miracle to find people who are willing to be in documentaries now, because like people are so media aware, and especially young people
Hmm.
who are like with TikTok and Instagram, and I think um, also when you say the word documentary, a lot of different things comes to mind for people, and often people are thinking about some kind of reality TV show where there was like the whole like 90s and 2000s in England and
Hmm.
America where it's like it just was about dragging people under the bus and like
Hmm.
really like exploiting people. um so yeah, I mean, I'm really curious as to like where we'll be in 20 years, like our relationship with the camera.
Yeah. I think from what I hear when you speak about your lead characters, I think if I was to summarize it into like three main characteristics you look for are humility,
Mm.
vulnerability, and authenticity. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there's something else that you prefer.
I think that's really well put. Yeah.
Um, and to go further now, you also mentioned like in 20 years what's going to happen. I think a very trending topic which is always around now is AI, and how does that how does that influence our lives, and how does that integrate into our lives nowadays, especially with the use of ChatGPT, how people use that on like almost anything nowadays. I mean, people even use it to um, ask it for advice on how to communicate with other individuals.
Mm.
Like the
That's funny.
like
Do you see
an
that?
article popped up on my phone. Yeah, an article popped up on my phone saying like how often you use ChatGPT and how badly it is affecting your social life, because people are asking it for dating advice even.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so how do you see that? Maybe first of all, Ali, I want you to continue your point. Sorry.
Well, I was just saying that on Tinder now they have like a wingman feature, which is AI, where AI cleans up your texts. So you're chatting with someone through AI, and then you're receiving messages through AI, and you're having a whole conversation, meeting someone for the first time through AI on
Really?
Tinder. Yeah, isn't that crazy to think about? You know,
Oh
Wow.
I
no.
don't get how people, and most people are kind of meeting people through online dating. So
Hmm.
what's that gonna do to all relationships moving forward? I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess just like the prospect of ever meeting them in reality just becomes more and more daunting, and like you're probably like online I'm this really smart, quick-witted, like funny guy.
And it's not matching the same personality as in person.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
going forward then for documentaries and this category of filming where it which lives on being authentic and being your natural self, how is AI going to influence future documentaries?
Yeah, I've really thought about it. Um, 'Cause I think the obvious thing that comes to mind is like, oh, deep fakes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, deep fakes have been around for quite a while now, and they haven't had the same impact that people thought they would. I
Mm-hmm.
think with, there's specific cases with like politicians or famous
Yeah.
people, or like in pornography, it's been used. But in you know, or it's been used strategically in documentaries to cover people's identity, who
Hmm.
who don't want to be. But I haven't seen a case where it's like a whole film about someone that wasn't real. I think in some strange way we still have like a innate human sense of sensing like what is real and what is authentic, and at least the technology isn't there yet. Like it's there's something that our intuition like can sniff out at the moment, at least. I think for me what's more concerning is like voice cloning,
Mm-hmm.
um because when editing a documentary, you are condensing time, and you are often like um both like condensing time but also condensing an hour conversation into 2 minutes and trying to
Right.
give an impression of like, is this representative of the emotional core of what happened in this moment. um, and like it's been used in some cases where it hasn't been transparently communicated, and the technology is so good right now that like the normal human ear can't tell the difference, and all it requires is you to upload um, a few like samples of someone's voice to then just be able to freely write like text from their voice. And that kind of thing could easily be used like an off-camera response that you can just completely change, make someone say something that they didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case where you're filming someone for a longer period of time, most normal people are not going to remember, like unless they have like a legal team behind them, they're not going to remember that they said that specific thing and not another thing. um so I think that's where it gets really murky, is like where the contract with the viewer isn't clear, um and you don't know whether what you're seeing is like artificial or real. And I think for Netflix and streamers generally, they've figured out that making documentaries, there's a big appetite for them, and it's a lot cheaper than making fiction series. They can make 10 documentaries for the price of one fiction series. Um,
Yeah.
and so what was previously, documentaries probably 15, 20 years ago was usually someone who was really interested in like one topic, or um, they were like hired by the BBC, and that was like their thing. And now it's kind of the tools of character driven documentary that requires like human contact and a genuine trust has been outsourced, and like um, it's become a commodity that everyone wants. Like everyone wants like a really strong character with intimate access, and there are these like key buzzwords that and so I think what you get is people kind of using the tools of um, character, or like the methods of character driven documentary with
Hmm.
like questionable motives. Like either they're trying to portray someone in a bad light, or like there is actually like investigative journalism disguised as
Mm-hmm.
something else. And then I can kind of respond like that worries me, I think, because that also is like creating a general distrust in um, like making people wary of the media, and I think now like the true crime genre has reached a peak, but like still it's like everywhere you look there's some news story about something horrific that's happened to someone. um so yeah, I would say at least right now that's my biggest concern. um I think that people also talk about it in editing and like whether it'll be able to generate images, and I think those kind of more creative usages are more. I see more potential in it than worry. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that you can harness those things as a creative tool and like work with it. And I think it still requires like a human vision. Like it's very clear that those tools by themselves don't understand anything, or they don't have a vision, like a creative vision. Like you can't AI David Lynch film. Like I think you can
Ah,
do
that's
it
true.
in a way. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Um, I think I enjoy using AI for like tasks that don't, like non-meaningful tasks. Just
Hmm.
admin stuff, things that can be kind of sped up by the use of AI. But for me, I really enjoy the social interaction, the genuine, authentic interactions with other individuals. Um, and I constantly think about this on whether are we as a society becoming worse at that or are we becoming better? Um, Sometimes I feel like we are becoming better because, for example, with the, the generation that the generations that are coming after the millennials, they're kind of like learning through experience from their parents. Um, Maybe I'm speaking from my personal experience, but from my personal experience, my context, I can say that I would say emotional intelligence has improved from in my generation, mainly because we got to experiment with our parents. I don't know if that's very clear, if that point is a bit vague.
Hmm.
Um, uh, what what I'm trying to say is, I think from the previous generations, our emotional intelligence is getting better, but there are certain situations that I've faced in my life where I feel like we're actually not improving.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I'm like slightly conflicted on that point.
Hmm.
Maybe if you guys could share your experiences, it will give me a better perspective, better understanding.
um, yeah, let me add on to that. I wish AI would do my laundry. I wish it would do my dishes. I wish it would do the things that go to the DMV for me. I don't want it to do my art. I don't want it to make my movies, you know? That's how I
Yeah.
feel about it. It's like
Yeah.
I think it's a great
Oh
tool,
man.
but it's gonna people are gonna lose their jobs. And then what?
Yeah.
We can't just have AI everything.
Yeah, no,
Oh man.
exactly. Fully agreed.
All right. So tell
Mm.
us about
Yeah.
and in terms of for yeah, it's interesting how you brought it up for documentary filmmaking. Maybe it can help you with editing too, like cutting stuff out and finding highlights and stuff.
I
If
think
you have 20
definitely
hours
with
of
like,
footage, maybe it can lead you some way. I don't know if we're there yet with the technology, but I think that's kind of the potential of where it's heading.
I think again with like assistant with menial
Hmm.
work, um, it can transcribe, it can log, it can recognize whether something's a close up or a long shot. Like all that stuff
Yeah.
that has required a whole team of assistants, like that's just been eliminated. Like
Hmm.
I'm like Adobe is um, or all like editing software is like
Hmm.
advancing so quickly that I'm sure like you'll just be able to like bring your footage into the program and it will do all of the organization that will save you like a lot of
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us how about
Mm.
how you pick your topics then. How do you pick? Like, let's talk about Eternal Father specifically.
Mm.
How did that documentary come about for you?
Um, It's usually in a very roundabout way. I was watching my grandma, who's 91, with my niece, who's 9 years old. Um, and I was just watching my niece, like take her hand and help her with her shoes. And I began wondering, like, what does my niece think about my grandma's mortality? Is she aware that she's approaching death? Or what does she think is going to happen after she dies? Does she believe that there's an afterlife? Um, and that was something I was conscious of and interested in. And I was also aware of cryonics. But I think that cryonics for me, I've always just dismissed it as something that's like, oh, that's like for billionaires, and it's this kind of sci-fi thing that um, like didn't really interest me, to be honest. But like when I began to like pair the two things together, I wondered like, how do we all deal with the prospect of our own mortality, and how do we deal with that collectively? And then I thought, oh, actually, cryonics is quite an interesting way of challenging the way that we think about death, and discussing it in a way that we don't usually do that. So I just began doing some research, and I found out that in England, all of these cryonics meetings like took place in really like normal looking like town centers with like carpeted floors, and it just, I loved this mismatch of like the really lo-fi domestic and really kind of sci-fi technology, because the stuff that I'd seen was all this very clinical, like white laboratory, and people with long beards, and it seemed really new agey. But what I discovered was that it was really a lot of normal people who were interested in this, who, if you saw them on the street, you wouldn't turn an eye. So I went to a lot of these closed meetings that took place, and and that it was difficult to get access, because they were understandably kind of skeptical of my intentions, and I think they've had their trousers pulled down in public a few times, like people that come in and then ridicule them. Um, and again, for me, it's really important to like find the right person. So I went to a lot of these meetings, and I was becoming frustrated that I couldn't imagine like that there would be a film that I could make. But then at the last meeting, I met NASA, who had brought his family along, and just the fact that they were there as a family, and there was this warmth between them, and like watching the children experience all of these, you know, strange medical procedures. I just wanted to understand, what's going through their head. What do they think about this, and how do they speak about this as a family? And instantly, like my mind began going. So, um, I reached out to him and asked if I could come and visit him at his home. And it's usually like that. It's usually like a vague idea or a thought, and then I just need to like find the right person that like opens up the universe, and then all of a sudden I can kind of see there being a film about it. Other people, I guess, work in like, maybe they read an article, or they like, and sometimes I wish I worked in that way, but like it's often the like looking for the right person that takes the most amount of time. So yeah, it's usually something that's going on in my own life that I want to find an excuse or someone to help me try and understand that like in another way. And with the police boot camp, I'd always thought about like national service and how I respond personally to authority. And personally, I hate being told what to do. And if someone's like, this is the way we're doing this, and no questions, you just got to do it. That's infuriating for me. And so I was thinking like, I would be a terrible soldier and a policeman. So why would anyone want, like, what kind of person wants to do this? And then I was like following the Danish police on Twitter, and then I saw like their post about this boot camp. And so that was a complete coincidence, like that I stumbled across that. Um, and yeah, with Sam, again, it was a kind of personal reason that when I was growing up, there was talk about this like like trash incinerator that was going to be built near to my house, and I remember seeing all these billboards around the place of like people protesting, and I was asking, I think someone at my school, like, what is going on? And had the feeling that the adults weren't telling me something, and that I was kind of being brushed off, and I wasn't getting the full truth. But I could also sense that it was kind of threatening something that I really appreciated and that was dear to me. And so I think I recognized this, like, when I heard about the power plant being built, I thought, like, there's probably some other kids in the same situation. Like, how can I explore this emotional dilemma, like, from another kid's point of view?
It's- It sounds like whenever you're learning about a new topic that you found interesting, you try to explore that from someone else's perspective, if I'm not mistaken. And you want to share that, like you've mentioned before, you want to share that person's um, kind of subjective uh, perspective of the whole situation. And in that, it also teaches you um, a different, like a lot more about the topic itself because it allows you to explore your thoughts, maybe, and then it also teaches, and as you're exploring your thoughts, you learn more about the topic that maybe you didn't think about beforehand.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask, what's the importance of like visuals or making documentaries cinematic? I've noticed in your films you always try to make things look a certain like clean, and cinematic,
Mm.
and as opposed to more rugged filmmaking. And I appreciate it, but how do you do that? Um, is that something you're consciously thinking of when you pick a topic or a subject?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned from that first project in the asylum center
Mm-hmm.
was that there are some ideas that are suited to film and some ideas that are suited to other media.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were in this one room with white walls, it wasn't a very visual experience. And so I think that's, from the outset, I'm like, does this need to be told visually or can it be told in another way? And um, can the can you visually tell something that you can't tell verbally? And I think I'm often drawn to like a single location, um, or you know, in Sam, it's like the school and the surrounding area. In Into the
Mm-hmm.
Blue, it's this very kind of secluded cabin in the woods. In Into the Blue, it's NASA's house, and I think that helps me like take some clear choices, and have some rules of like how am I gonna portray this place, and how can I portray it in a way that like creates some kind of emotion or a feeling about it. I think it's harder to do if you're just out in loads of different locations, like
Mm-hmm.
filming. Because I think in all of those films, you can very clearly make the choice of like when do you remain indoors and when do you go outdoors, and like and use that to create a mood and a sense of intimacy or claustrophobia. Um, and so I think I never thought of myself in that way. Because I'm not a cinema buff. Like I never, as a child, I never spent time inside watching films. I was always outside playing. And it's only later in life that I've like been trying to catch up on all the films that I didn't see. I think, sounds cliche, but I'm interested in people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my entryway. And but I think that the best documentaries that I've seen they just feel like a film. I don't think in my mind, is it a documentary or is it fiction? So I think that's what I strive towards, is making something where it just feels like a film, and you can have that um, suspense of disbelief for the time that you're seeing the film, and you're not constantly reminded of like um, the person behind the camera somehow. Um,
Right. I
yeah.
think, and when we were watching your film, at first Said was telling me, "Oh, I thought this was a fiction film. Like, you didn't realize it was a documentary when you were watching Eternal Father the first time." I was like, "Yeah, dude, this is a
Really.
documentary. Just because it's
Ali blew my
shot
mind when he
so
said
well."
that towards the end. I was like, people are people are actually thinking about this and actively like actively doing this in their lives. People want to just like how, why, who? But yeah, it was a bit it was crazy that to find for me like it was crazy to see these topics as real stories. Like they were so out there and so bizarre that you'd think it's like this has got to be fake, but in
Mm,
reality, I think that's what that's what strikes people, um, like confuses people. Like
mm,
it's actually the weird, crazy things that happen, the crazy situations in life that are the most authentic and most genuine ones. Uh,
mm,
and we shouldn't necessarily like brush them aside because those leave a lasting impression on you. Because whether it's a documentary that you've watched or whether it's an incident that's happened to you or it's a person that you've met or whatever it is,
mm,
it's those crazy moments that they you shouldn't let go of them. There are those memories that will last with you forever, and
mm.
there are stories that you can share with your kids, your grandkids, and you kind of want to really hold on to them. And that, from maybe just to add another comment on this, I think that's why we do need documentaries going forward, um, because they're like constant reminders. They're the history logs for us of raw emotions, authenticity, um, and just how regular human beings can also have crazy moments in their lives and just
Mm, mm.
experience something bizarre and wild.
No, I think it's really
Um,
well said.
yeah. Anyway,
Well, I want
before
to
we
ask
end
when you're.
this, yeah,
I
sorry,
want to
go ahead.
ask, are you prompting topics in conversation, or is it, yeah, more natural? Like in Eternal Father, there's a few times where people are like having conversations about, um, like what's gonna happen to the father. Is that something you come in, hey, let's talk about this, or what do you guys think about this, or do you just hang back and capture it as it's happening?
Yeah, no, in Eternal Father, I'm very consciously um, trying to, especially with the kids, just figure out how they feel about specific things. And so I'm just kind of chucking something out there and just saying, "Hey, I want you guys to," and that's why kids are great because they can do it in a playful way that's like
Mm-hmm.
self-sustained. And so if I just say to them, I want to, like, imagine that you wake up in the future and you're with your parents, like, what would you say? Can you play it out in this scenario? And then
Mm-hmm.
I let them do it in their own way. Um, so I'm never like putting words in their mouth, but I'm at least like creating some rules for the game or like
Mm-hmm.
a structure. And I think that helps most people relax, like knowing, that you have at least some kind of task. Um, and I think for the film as well, like, um, yeah, I guess every film's different. A lot in Into the Blue, not really, because we were just
Right.
so far away. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it depends.
Every project you need to do a different approach or style towards documentary. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Mm.
I want to ask you. I have one more question. My last question. I want to ask you about I don't know if you heard about what happened with No Other Land, the documentary filmmaker. They just won an Oscar. and that film
Mm.
got so much praise and buzz, and then he just got attacked a few days ago, the other ones, for making this
Mm.
documentary. Um, what are your thoughts on how that affects documentary filmmakers in general? Um, is this something new, or is this something more common for documentary filmmakers?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think as documentary filmmakers, we have a huge responsibility um, when you document someone's life and put it into the public. Um, you let go of control, and the the film that you've crafted is no longer yours. It becomes um, a public entity, and so the fact that um, is it Hamdan?
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
Hamdan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I mean, in that case, it's a filmmaker. There's been plenty of other cases where it's people who have been in a film who are then persecuted or attacked. Um, the fact that Hamdan was attacked for for the film that he made um, is really awful, and I think it. Um, yeah, I mean, it sounds clear, like it was clearly linked to the fact that the film had got recognition as a kind of punishment for doing that. So, I mean, I wish we could live in a world where you were able to freely express yourself and not have to pay those consequences. But I think there at least needs to be some kind of system of like holding people accountable for that. And I think what makes it even worse in that case is that the system around him is not being accountable for it and is trying to actually cover that up. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I like I don't know how much more there is to say about it really, but I think it's just really like made me really sad. And I think that the fact that after that, you really hope that when you make a film, it's going to raise awareness and help a situation. But it sounds as if um, the situation in that village that they filmed has actually become a lot worse since that film came out. And I think it's because there's no consequences, and they know that they can get away with that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Like, it
It
seemed.
makes it hard when you're doing a controversial topic in the documentary, and how people
Mhm.
will receive or react to a documentary, because people have different points of views and thoughts, and that's okay. But like for you doing a film about someone trying to escape death, for some people that's
Yeah.
blasphemy, and
mm,
people will be very uncomfortable with that. But I don't think it's, yeah, it's not fair to come after a filmmaker. But I understand their situation's a bit different. Yeah.
yeah. No, I wouldn't feel comfortable like making that association because I think what I'm doing is nothing compared to like the courage that it took for them to do that. And it's like completely putting yourself on the line in a completely different way. Um, but I think it's just something kind of absurd in receiving like the highest form of recognition and the world's eyes being on you, and then for that to happen and for people just to be able to get away with it with no consequences, it makes it less and less attractive for other people to do the same. And I think that's the intention is just to the hope that like eventually people will stop. But yeah, I think there's been a backlash and there's like a conversation going on. The fact that we're talking about it now, I think, is important as well to um, like so people don't forget.
On that topic, when you're making your own documentaries, are you also constantly thinking about the consequences of what could happen or what, like, how people can be affected by your documentaries? Obviously, not Like, yeah, on that scale, on your.
I think I've never made a film where so much is at stake as in that situation, or that I've never made a film that's so politically charged that I feel like I would be putting someone's life at risk, or um, I think also intentionally, because I really wouldn't like, that's a huge responsibility to have. And I think there was, that there was a situation with Retrograde where one of the people in the film was targeted after, like, they were recognized from the film.
Mhm.
I think that also, like, makes it harder to, I think that's just, I at least see a difference between journalism and documentary filmmaking.
Hmm.
And when the lines get blurred between the two, I think it's hard to make creative decisions when you know that, like, there's going to be huge human consequences. Just like the decision to show people's faces. That's important for film as a medium, but is it more important than someone's life? I don't feel comfortable um, making those kind of decisions. So yeah, I think I've kind of tried to steer clear of situations where I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's not worth even risking that to happen. Like, yeah, it human life is more important than anything else.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
Agree. Yeah, for sure. So, what's next for you in terms of your films? You have any documentaries on you're working on that you can talk about, or
I just finished another short film for The Guardian, which is within the Cryonics universe. It's
oh
about
wow,
uh, and it's even more out there than Eternal Father. Um,
wow.
Okay.
it's it's
Is it
about
the sequel when he comes back or no? You were saying.
I would like to keep filming NASA like up to that point. So we'll see. There might be a sequel at some point.
Oh,
Um,
all right.
no, it's about a uh, cryonics pioneer in the UK who he was one of the first people to do that, and he promised his wife that they would be frozen and reunite in the future and come back to life together. But after she dies, sooner than he expects, in the following years, he meets a new partner who doesn't want to be frozen. So he's in the kind of dilemma of whether he should do it or not.
Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Oh no. Should he
She's
move
gonna
on or should
wake
he
up
not?
to a surprise. Yeah, she's gonna
Exactly.
wake up to a huge surprise.
Oh,
That's awesome. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Now, when does that? What's the process for that? When does it come out, or can we see it?
Sometime later this year. Um,
Cool.
hopefully, it will premiere at a festival at some point, and then be online like towards the end of the year. Um, so yeah,
Looking forward
that's
to that.
upcoming thing. Yeah.
That sounds interesting.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
yeah.
What did we learn
Um,
today?
we learned quite a lot. We learned, you know, I think something that's important is like we learned how to keep our humanity, maintain it, uh,
mm,
be authentic, be be vulnerable, uh, be humble. Those are things that can, make you a better human being and also maybe even make you a better actor.
mm.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's also building those trust, trust in within relationships, crucial in life.
Mm. No,
That's what I
exactly.
learned.
Yeah. Oh, thank you
Ali, what
so
about
much.
you?
Nadia.
Thank you,
Oh,
Amr.
sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Omar. Yeah.
Signing out.
Ali, I was asking you what did you learn as well, and you just like kind of threw it to the side. Do you not want to?
Yeah, no, it was cool talking about filmmaking for sure, and learning about the process of how these films are made, a little bit behind the scenes. cool to learn about.
Fantastic. All right,
Good. I'm
Amar,
glad you
we
got
could
something.
salute to cover the camera. Slightly, it's this is our just a little tradition. If you want, you can join us, guys. Thank you for watching and peace.
Out.